So, Paul, I want to start with your strengths and the process of discovering them. What should listeners know about Don Clifton? Who is he, and who is he to you?
That is a great question to start with. I adore Don Clifton. I had never met him because he passed away in 2003, but I think personally he was the greatest psychologist of the 20th century. And the reason I say that is that psychology is filled with very bright people analyzing all kinds of things about humans and how we think and feel. But much of the field of psychology up until the 1950s was focused on what's wrong with us. What are our neuroses or psychoses or problems, flaws? And the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, the DSM handbook, is so packed with a taxonomy of a bazillion things that are wrong with us. And Don Clifton, who was from the Midwest and had fought in the war and came home from the war, he thought he wanted to do something positive for the world.
Mm.
And so in 1952, he asked the question, well, I believe he was a graduate student at University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And he said, what if we focused on what's right with people instead of what's wrong with people? What would happen? So for the next 50 years, he literally interviewed hundreds of thousands of people in usually 90-minute structured interviews to find out what made them tick. And he would ask these questions to find out their natural, innate talents. His definition of a strength was a naturally recurring pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving that could be productively applied. So it does depend a little bit on the context, but it mostly depends on your patterns, your recurring patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving, who you are when you wake up, and you can't turn that off.
Mm.
And so I love that he taps into that natural innate talent, what I would call a God-given talent.
Mhm.
And then he studied it for 50 years, and he created a taxonomy of over 400 talents that he had observed from successful people who were doing great work. And he would interview the top life insurance salesperson at a company and find out what made them tick and why were they such a high performer. And then he would catalog that talent. Well, before he died, he worked with a Harvard business professor, or Harvard, maybe computer scientist, and they created an online version of an assessment. It's 177 questions. And if you answer those questions quickly, I think you have 20 seconds to answer each one, so you can't overthink it. But if it asks you these questions, and then they tell you what your top 5 natural God-given talents or strengths are. And the beautiful thing about what's now called Clifton Strengths, it used to be called Strengths Finder, but it's now been taken by over 31 million people. And it's changed many people's lives because it helps you focus on what's right with you and what
Mm.
is unique about you. And I absolutely love Don Clifton's work, his mission. His grandson, John Clifton, is now the CEO of Gallup. And John's goal, while he's CEO of Gallup, is to help 1 billion people on Earth discover their Clifton strengths.
Mm.
So there's 34 themes out of the 400 strengths. He boiled it down to 34 strengths themes. And when you take the assessment for just $20, you'll get your top 5 Clifton strengths in order. And to answer your question, that was a long answer to a
Yeah.
very short question,
Yeah.
but a very important one to me. My number 1 strength, according to Don Clifton, is learner. My number 2 strength is input. My number 3, and my personal favorite, is ideation. 4 is intellection. 5 is strategic. Those are all what are called strategic thinking themes. In fact, my
Mhm.
number 6 strength is analytical. So my top 6 strengths are all in the strategic thinking domain. And the other domains include executing strengths, how do you get stuff done, influencing strengths, how do you influence other people, and then relationship strengths, which is how you interact with other people. But those are my top 6, and
Yeah.
I think they're very, very accurate, and I'm really grateful that Don Clifton's work has helped me understand myself better.
So, so he's a very influential figure for you. I'm wondering, what was the experience like when you first discovered this and discovered these strengths about yourself? What did that feel like?
First of all, it felt like it was long overdue. I took the assessment in February of 2012. I'd been a CEO for 22 years. I'd started 7 companies. I had been married. I had 8 children. I have 7 siblings. I've had lots of good friends in my life, and I had no clue what, what words described me. I think I had not very much self-awareness at that point. And as I read the report, there's a insights report that comes that's totally personalized to you based on your top 5 strengths and the intensity of those strengths. So when you get this top 5 report, it's unlikely to say the same thing to you that it says to any other human being. You are so uniquely you. Your blend of top 5 and the intensity of those top 5 is personalized to you. So the Gallup algorithm personalizes these descriptors. And so my learner sounds different than someone else's learner. And it's extremely hyper personalized. As I read this report about me, I thought, this explains everything I've ever done and how I've done it. And I felt like it understood me better than my mom did, or my wife, or my best friends. I just felt totally understood for the first time. It was like really incredible.
Oh, all right. So I've written them down, and we're going to just use this as a touch point as we go throughout the conversation. So I wrote down learner, input, ideation, intellection, strategic, and analytical. So a bonus. All right. So now that we've got that as a backdrop and you understand yourself and we understand you better, I want to ask you what might sound like a silly question, which is, how do you take an idea like, I want to connect people to their past and execute on that idea? How do you write that business plan?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it actually really did happen. So my ideation kicks in every morning, every night, like every time I'm on a road trip, traveling in a car or on an airplane, my ideation is going nonstop. And I say I love it because I just love the thinking about what's possible. And Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, before he passed away, I read his biography. It's called, or his autobiography. It's called Paul Allen, Idea Man. And people that are in the world of ideas, Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, it's just so inspiring. There's just so many incredible ideas. Paul Allen, the other Paul Allen, lived his life to answer this question: what should exist? And then he would fund it or found it and make all kinds of amazing things exist. But to answer your question, the idea to put all the world's genealogy records on the internet and to make it possible for anybody to discover their ancestors really hit me, I think, for the first time in late 1995. And I was at the time CEO of a company called Infobases. It was a 5-year-old company. Our mission was to put all the world's best books on CD-ROM. We wanted to identify the best books ever written in every field of human knowledge and to index them using this search engine that my brother founded, a company called Folio, built in Utah around just a few years after WordPerfect. And it was the world's best search engine for desktop retrieval of large libraries of content. So I worked there for 2.5 years, and then I started Infobases. And the mission for Infobases was inspired by the president of Brigham Young University, Jeffrey Holland, who in 1988 gave a speech that talked about gathering up all the greatest truth and knowledge in the world and making it available. And he said that's what universities and libraries do. But I realized that in the tech world, we could do that digitally. So for 5 years, we were focused on digitizing all the world's most important books in many fields of knowledge. And we had one major problem: copyright. It was really hard as a young 20-something-year-old founder of a tech company to go to publishers or authors and to license the electronic rights to their material. That was not an easy task. We had some successes early on, but then as the value of digital content started to become more obvious, it was really hard to get publishers or authors to pay attention to us. And so we started turning our attention to public domain content. I started a master's degree in library science in 1990, and I dropped out because the company started taking off. But I spent a lot of time at the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and I spent a lot of time studying copyright law and when something becomes public domain. And I was at an internet conference in San Francisco in 1995. It was called Internet Developers 2. It was the second conference. Apparently, they had one in 94. And as a CD-ROM publisher, I realized that the internet was going to replace, it was going to disrupt, to put it into your words and Clayton's words, it was going to totally disrupt the CD-ROM industry. And so I clearly saw that that would happen. And I also knew that copyright was really challenging. And I also knew that especially in my faith community, a knowledge of your ancestors, finding the writings, letters, journals, history of all your ancestors is extremely important to a lot of people. So when you think about the most important or most valuable content in the world, in one sense, your own family writings may be the most important content you could preserve and pass down. So it was September 95 that the idea struck that we could put all the world's genealogy records on the internet, and they were all in the public domain. All of the birth, death, marriage records are in the public domain, and we wouldn't need permission from anybody to do this. And so within a few months, we had put over 50 million records on the internet. June of 1996, we launched the original version of Ancestry.com. And a year later, we incorporated it in Delaware as a C Corp. And, I used my learner, I think, and my input for the next couple years to find out where are all the most important data sets in the genealogical world. I went to dozens of genealogy conferences. I read reference books. I love buying reference books on used bookstores or on Amazon. All the librarian tools and reference books that tell you where all the data is. And so we used a book called Red Book and a book called The Source that were the two most encyclopedic versions of where are all the genealogy records in the world? How do you find them? And this was for people that were doing genealogy the old-fashioned way.
Mm-hmm.
We used those books as roadmaps to go find all the content that existed everywhere. And within a couple of years, we had billions of records on the internet.
Yeah. If you need to pause, do you want to get a drink of water?
I do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, much better.
So what I think is interesting as I hear you tell this story is that you'd already started a company that you were trying to digitize content, and you had started out with books. And so there was a level of expertise, a level of knowledge that made it possible for you to be aware of how to technically do the work that you needed to do. You realized then that that was going to be disrupted, but then you had this skill of, I can apply this somewhere else. The most important books or records that people care about is family records. And so that when you had that idea, and there was some element of inspiration because you'd heard someone that you admired, which was Jeffrey Holland, then it could all come together. But there was some foundational work that had been done that prepared you that when you had that idea, you could act on it.
That is exactly right. And what was really important and helpful was that in 1996, when we were shifting from the CD-ROM business model to the online genealogy business, we sold the CD-ROM business to a large religious publishing company, but we kept 30 employees. So all the developers and data prep, all the search engine folks, everyone on the company who had been working on publishing electronic books and libraries on CD-ROM, they just shifted their attention slightly towards genealogical content and doing it online instead of doing it on CD-ROM. We had the perfect scenario where we just hit the ground running. And literally by July of 98, we were cash flow positive, doing millions of dollars of ARR.
Wow.
And it was just such an exciting time. I was in the right place at the right time with the right team and the right skills, like you said, to execute on that idea.
Yeah, you're reminding me, this is such a great example of Amar Bide, who an academic who said that 70% of all successful new businesses end up in a different place from where they started. And Ancestry was a perfect example of that, of like, it ended up being successful, but that is not where you started. You started in a very different place, but you kept pivoting, but everything that you did, from an S curve perspective, you jumped to a new curve, but you had the foundation that allowed you to jump to that next curve so that you were continually building on what you had built before. Oh,
That's right. Yeah.
so good. All right. So you had learner was affecting this, ideation was affecting this, strategic was affecting this, analytical was affecting this because you're going to all these source books. Where does the intellection piece come in?
But I think you skipped the most important one. You skipped input.
Oh, say more, because I don't
Let
understand
me,
what that is
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
It's a weird word to describe a
Yeah.
person's talent.
Yeah.
Like
Please.
nobody told me in ninth grade or 12th grade, Paul, you really are strong in input, you know? But Dawn identified input. It
Uh-huh.
is an insatiable desire to collect and gather knowledge or anything to gather and then to dispense it to people that need it. So
Uh,
archivists and librarians, people that are collectors, everyone who has input has some personal interest that they just collect. It might be taking notes and having all of your life's notes in a file that you can retrieve. But the thing that drives a person with input crazy, and I've experienced this so many hundreds of times, is if I know there's a resource and I can't find it for the person that needs it right now. So input for me in the world of internet allows someone with input who has this insatiable desire to collect and gather and organize and then to dispense what people
mhm.
need when they need it. It's like this perfect power tool for a person with input. I could do notebooks and paper and things like that, but that doesn't scale. And so I feel like input was probably the strength that
Uh-huh.
I have that led me to do the gathering and publishing at scale for both religious and educational content on CD-ROM, and then the world's genealogy collection on the internet. And everything I'm doing today in my current companies is using input to
Yeah.
find and organize, collect, index. And now we're putting AI power on top of all these data collections. So I'm having the time of my life because input has so much modern technology that supercharges it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So input is, in a way, it's a why. It's what animates the work that you're doing. You're doing this because you want to be able to collect the data that will allow other people to learn and grow and develop and to archive it. So, okay, which brings us to your current project, Soar. You want to soar, you want to help other people soar. Of all the things you could have started, why this? Tell us about what it is you're doing.
Don Clifton's first book, published in 1992, was called Soar with Your Strengths.
Oh.
And when he built the online StrengthsFinder assessment, it obviously made it possible for that assessment to scale beyond him and his trained psychologists. There was no longer a 90-minute in-person needed. And so Soar with Your Strengths to me is the finest book anyone could ever read to discover how to live the best possible life, given your natural talents. Now, Don hadn't defined the 34 strengths themes yet. That was later, 1998 or 99, and the assessment came out online. But in his 40 years prior to the book in 1992, he had observed how people could discover their talents and grow them. He has in that book 5 clues to your natural talent. And literally every person could take a look at those 5 clues. And even without taking his assessment, you could start to get a sense of what your strengths are, what your natural talents are. For example, one of the clues to talent that Don put in his book is called rapid learning. Let's say you sign up for a class in physics and lots of people are struggling with it, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's like I already know this. It's so easy. This just all makes sense to me. When you experience rapid learning, that's a clue that you have a strength in that area. And these other
Mm.
4 clues to talent are also really powerful. They're little questions you can ask yourself. And so Don's book, Soar with Your Strengths, to me, is a roadmap for human excellence that literally every person born on the planet, if you discover what your natural talents are and play to your strengths in your education journey, in your work journey, and in your relationships and hobbies, if you play to your strengths, there's a very good chance you'll become excellent. And if you focus on the top strengths, you could become best of breed, best in class, and then you get rewarded and recognized for good work. And that's very validating. And humans flourish when you're able to accomplish good things using your natural talents. And so I tried to get Gallup when I was working there for 5 years to buy Soar.com and to use digital techniques to scale up the marketing and the application and to help StrengthsFinder go viral. And it didn't work out. So Gallup is a wonderful company with decades of history, but not necessarily the fastest development company and innovation company, building apps or launching, kind of catching the next wave. I think they're accelerating their pace now. And I think Gallup will reach the billion users someday, and not just, give them the assessment results. I think they'll create platforms that allow you to constantly use your strength throughout your life. So I'm a huge fan of Gallup and its leadership team. But when I left Gallup, I had learned so much at Gallup that I felt needed to be digitized and enhanced and spread out to as many people as possible. I was the global strengths evangelist for Gallup for 5 years. And I've come to love the word evangelist. In fact, I was on a Sirius XM broadcast in August of last year, and it was a wonderful conversation with a former C-SPAN producer, a wonderful guy, Steve Scully. And at the end of the call, he asked me, what do you want to be known for? What's your legacy at the end of the day? And for the first time in my life, I thought, I'm an evangelist for Gallup StrengthsFinder because I think it's the greatest assessment ever created, and I want everybody in the world to have access to it. But I think what I want to be known for is I want to be an evangelist of all good things. Paul in the New Testament was an evangelist for Jesus Christ, and I was named Paul, and I love that name because of him. And I thought, if I could just find all good things, wherever they are, in every field, in every subject, in every domain, and spread that goodness to as many people as possible, that's what my life mission is, I think. And that's what I said in August. And when I finished the interview, I thought, that's what I want on my tombstone. That's an evangelist of all good things.
Oh, that's so good. All right. So I love the name Soar and the provenance of that, and you want to be an evangelist of all good things. So talk to us about what does Soar do? Tell us, get granular and specific for us.
Soar is currently in our latest incarnation, which is about a year old, has morphed itself into what we call an AI studio. There are venture studios or venture building organizations that are kind of like incubators for lots of projects or lots of companies, as a matter of fact. We decided to call ourselves an AI studio, and we are incorporating 15 corporations, Delaware C corporations. We've already done 5. We've got 10 more on the roadmap. And we have a multi-million-dollar tech stack that is really powerful AI that can be used in many contexts. And so, as I told you about my original start into tech, it was built on the Folio search engine. So electronic text, powerful search engine, Boolean search, hypertext linking. That's how I learned about computers and business, was building a company using the Folio search engine. Well, Google is the search engine that everyone uses today, but it doesn't have any of the features that Folio had. It's just a web crawler and a web search engine. But if you have 1,000 important books in one field, Google doesn't really help you very much. So what Soar AI Studio has is a transcription engine for video and audio and a search engine for electronic text. And so we're getting closer to rebuilding Folio in the web world. That can be applied in career, workplace, faith, citizenship, health, legal, all these different contexts. You need a great search engine that's not Google. So every one of our subsidiary companies gets the transcription tool and the data pipeline and the search engine that could power their searchability. But then in the last 3 years, as we got more and more into machine learning and AI, 2 years before GPT-3, ChatGPT came out, our team was learning how to build custom machine learning models that would take great training, such as sales training, leadership training, management training. There's a $400 billion global industry around workplace training. And according to Marshall Goldsmith, almost none of it sticks. You go through these classes, you learn all this stuff, and then you go back and revert back to all your natural habits, which are obviously not as good as what the trainers want you to do. And so leaders get training, managers get training, employees of all kinds get training, but we forget really quickly, and then we have bad habits and we don't apply it. So Marshall Goldsmith's big paper on this subject was called Leadership is a Contact Sport. And what it means is after training, you have to have repeated contact with the people that went through the training to remind them, to hold them accountable, to help them and mentor them to implement the training properly. And it turns out that when leaders go through training and there's no follow-up, there's no behavior change.
Right.
When
Right.
leaders go through training or managers go through training and there's a little bit of follow-up, there's a little bit of behavior change. But when there's periodic, regular, consistent follow-up, there's massive positive behavior change that's in line with the training that you invested in.
Mm-hmm.
So Soar is partnering with SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, and we're very excited that all of the best training and teaching in the world in all these fields that relate to our careers and our work and our occupations, AI can be quickly customized to pair with that training and to analyze after your calls, your meetings, whatever you're doing in the workplace that's digital. AI can sit on top of that and help you live up to the training that you just invested in. So, so that's a big part of Soar's AI platform.
Okay, so one of your verticals is sales. So talk me through how we would use it. So I've got a sales team. We need to train them. They come to you. Just talk me through the business model of how someone would engage with you around sales.
So first of all, in the disruptive innovation world, there is a Israeli company called Gong that's 8 years old that is worth $8 billion. Gong is an AI technology platform that records all your calls and gives you feedback on your sales. It's not a sales training company. It's an AI SaaS platform that is used by tons of people. Well, it turns out Gong is worth more than the top 20 sales training companies in the world combined, times 8.
Wow.
That's how disruptive an AI sales platform is versus a training company. Take all the best training companies combined, they're not even worth a fraction of what Gong is worth. So we partnered 3 years ago with a former Stephen R. Covey protege named Joe Thomas. He was the top 7 habits trainer at Franklin for many years. And then he went off and started his own sales training company. And I love Joe Thomas. He's such a deep thinker. He's an avid learner. He's got intellection, super smart guy. And he's studied sales for so many years that he created an entire new category of sales training called high focus communication. Now, let me just give you a little backdrop because this will answer your question about how sales AI works. He teaches people to focus on the customer. Well, everybody in sales says, oh, I focus on the customer. And then they proceed to talk about themselves, their company, their products, its features, and its benefits. Almost all sales communication and almost all marketing material says, buy our product because we have this and we do this and we'll solve this problem. We're award winning and we've done all these great things. It's 100% rah, rah, rah about me. Is that customer focused? No. So Joe has reversed the pattern of communication so that instead of I and we and us, and here's all the things we'll do for you, it changes it so that all your communication is, hey, you, Whitney, your sales team, when you learn high focus, your team will be able to talk to customers about their problems. And your salespeople will not be talking about themselves and you, but they will be investing in conversations around how if they choose to use your product, that they will have this outcome, and how will that affect their life? So it's a complete different perspective.
Right. Complete flip.
And it works incredibly well. Joe has so many clients who have doubled or tripled their sales close rates because they flipped all of their we, I, me to you and yours. And today things look like this, but if you choose this path, your future will look like this. And so he
Mhm.
knows the psychological motivations behind selling. And he's
Mhm.
just a brilliant trainer. He's trained 20 or 25,000 people on this. But here's the problem. Joe started training me and my co-founder Clint and our sales team, and we kept listening and learning and never doing what he taught. This was 3
Oh.
years ago or 4 years ago. I told Joe, this is the hardest thing I've ever tried to implement. I wrote in a journal for 35 years. What perspective did I use? First person. I did this, I did that. When people ask me about my company, I tell them about my company, about my products, about what it's doing. It's like I am so neurologically, my pathways are all I, me, we.
Mhm.
And I said, Joe, this is really hard. So we hired some data scientists and we built AI that would detect high focus or low focus. And we started an email grading tool for Joe. And you can go to highfocus.ai and sign up for his service, but
Mhm.
it's all built by Soar. And it's what led us to do machine learning and AI 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And now we're able to take whatever patterns he recognized and give feedback on every call and every Zoom meeting and every email. And within a few weeks of getting that feedback, I totally mastered high focus communication in writing. And
Wow.
when I'm intentional about it, I can fall into high focus communication on a sales call. And it's a complete game changer. So training can be really difficult if it's not natural, if it doesn't
Mhm.
suit your current habits, doesn't fit your current habits. But with AI feedback, you get, game film after every call.
Mhm.
And within a few weeks or months, like you could achieve mastery, I think, of almost any training technique.
Wow. So did you find your close rates and back to outcomes? Did your
I've
close
raised
rates
$8
improve?
million largely because I'm able to use high focus communication with investors, uh,
Where's
and
your
we're
outcome?
trying to train all of our
Yeah.
employees on high focus. Every new employee,
Yeah.
I promise, every new employee goes 100% low focus on day one.
Mhm.
It's just not normal or natural
Mhm.
to talk about you, the customer, and your needs and your experience and your outcomes. It's just not what we do. So, I think for
Wow.
sure it's made a big impact on partnering, fundraising, and now that we're generating revenue in a couple of our subsidiaries and we'll soon have 15 companies,
Mhm.
every one of those companies will be using high focus communication so that customers can hear about the product experience through their
Mhm.
own journey lens, their second person experience, and so we all have to communicate that way.
Yeah, so before I hop off this and go to something else, I'm just curious on the companies. So you talked about sales. What are one or two of your other companies that you're incubating that's further along right now or that you're just excited about?
Well, the first company we incorporated was citizenportal.ai. That was
Mhm.
last January,
Mhm.
and since we incorporated it, there have been maybe 600,000 hours of city council meetings, school board meetings all across the country. Every single jurisdiction has been mapped, and every government recorded video that we can find is being transcribed and indexed. And if you're a citizen living in some small town or some city, in some county, in some state, the goal of Citizen Portal would be that you can log in and find out what was said at all the meetings that your government officials, your elected representatives in this republic, constitutional republic, all of us have elected officials who are supposed to represent us. And Citizen Portal hopes that every citizen in the United States will be able to, at a glance, find out what your elected officials are doing and saying on any topic that matters to you. And not only the keyword search engine is there, but you can also use what's called a retrieval augmented generation query. It's a powerful AI query engine where you could ask a question like a GPT and find out what's going on in your school board What decisions have they made over the past 12 months? What are they planning to discuss in the next meeting? In fact, Citizen Portal is going to be launching thousands of GPTs in the OpenAI GPT store so that you could go and find Virginia GPT and you ask it a question. It will know what's going on in Virginia government. So the goal of Citizen Portal is a platform to help every citizen in the world become informed and engaged so that we can be stronger together as a country, and that the democratic foundations of our country, that every person matters, every voice matters, but every citizen needs to become informed and aware of what's going on. And we think Citizen Portal has a chance to do that. There's a crowdfunding right now on startengine.com/Citizen Portal. And there's a lot of funding that's coming into this from a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting because we just had local elections here, and I found myself frustrated because I wanted to figure out, who am I going to vote for? And fortunately, the local newspaper did a write-up on each of the candidates. But what if I didn't have the local newspaper? And so I think it's that ability, because right now it ends up really favoring the incumbents as opposed to people who are not, people who are new. And so I find what you're doing around that very intriguing in that regard.
I spoke to about 300 people on Saturday about Citizen Portal, and I believe less than 5% have a local newspaper that's covering government. There's just the demise of the newspaper industry with all the ad dollars going to the internet companies has led to a loss of good journalism around local, county, and state government. And so there's a huge void. In fact, if you think about the fourth estate or the fourth branch of government, which has always been historically playing a big role in checks and balances on government authority, that whole fourth estate has largely disappeared. And I think the reason citizen distrust in government is at an all-time high is we don't know what's going on, because those wonderful journalists who for centuries went and recorded and reported on what was going on and even investigated and told us what was happening, that's gone mostly. And so Citizen Portal could play a role in helping everyone get firsthand access to what's going on in government. And after Citizen Portal, we're launching Faith Portal, which hopes to take all the sermons taught in all the churches, mosques, and synagogues across the country and around the world. And everyone in the faith community, which is the majority of humankind, could then have a search engine of your favorite religious teacher and an AI that you could chat with so that you could remember, what did my pastor say about divorce? And what did my pastor say about anger or forgiveness or the suffering of Jesus? And all these faith communities haven't got these powerful digital tools or AI that reinforces the teaching. Now, AI can hallucinate. And what we're doing with retrieval augmented generation is that we don't hallucinate like a creative writer, but the AIs that Soar is building are more like a perfectly knowledgeable librarian retrieving what the humans said, wrote, or preached instead of making stuff up. So while I love generative AI, I think it's kind of scary. You wouldn't want to, trust every answer that GPT gives you. So Faith Portal, Founder Portal. Founder Portal is AI for entrepreneurs, and it will be trained by tens of thousands of videos and podcasts and books by the world's greatest entrepreneurs and entrepreneur teachers. And so the AI will coach you every step of the way from idea to exit. And that's an exciting product. And then a family portal's coming out. I won't go into detail there, but a friend portal will come out. I think that Facebook ruined the word friend, and that loneliness is at an all-time high around the world. And even though Facebook connected us to all of our friends, you don't have 1,000 friends, Whitney. You don't have 5,000 friends. You're lucky if you've got 3 or 4 close friends that you can call at 3 a.m. if there's an emergency. If you don't have any close friends that you can rely on or count on, it's more dangerous to your longevity than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So I think the word friend has been ruined. But Gallup, once again, published the world's best research on friendship in a book called Vital Friends. and we're hoping to collaborate with them somehow.
Huh.
And if everyone could take these assessments to find out who your friends really are and what role do they play in your life and how do you preserve that friendship forever, Gallup has discovered the reason why friendships break
Wow.
down. So Friend
Wow.
Portal will use AI to help you become a good friend, but also find out who your real friends are and align your expectations of friendship with what that person can naturally provide for you in
Oh,
that
that's
friendship.
exciting.
Yeah, Tom Rath, who wrote the
Yeah.
book, basically found that every relationship, whether it's marriage or friendship,
Mm.
breaks down when the expectation of one party doesn't match what the other
Yeah,
party
yeah,
can provide.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really an issue of talent and strength and match, and expectations can be modified so that it's the
Yeah.
right expectation of the right person, and then you're never disappointed.
I think that's so exciting. I'm thinking about one of my friends that I've had since I was 13, and we are still friends today, but that's because of her, not me. Because she's very good about staying in touch. And there were a number of years, like when we were in our 20s and 30s and like really, busy with our careers, where I would have just not focused on the friendship. And she just managed to just stay in there and stay connected. And so this idea of kind of this mashup of love languages, marriage counseling when it comes to friends, I think it's really interesting and exciting because, like you said, we all want to have not just acquaintances and not just like best friends, but like some people that are kind of in between that you feel really close to. And I think that's exciting.
Well,
Ooh,
I think the 34 strengths themes, one of them is relator.
yeah,
And I wonder if your friend has relator, because people with relator deeply value close relationships, and they deeply value authenticity
yeah.
and kind of vulnerability. And so there's this loyalty that comes with relator.
Mhm.
I don't have relationship strengths until I
Mhm.
get to number 17. And so,
Wow.
but thankfully, there are people like that. My wife most of her strengths are people related strengths. And
Mhm.
she's just the center of activity for family gatherings, for friends, for community. She's just always the heart of the bringing
Yeah,
people together. I've got a daughter on a mission in Latvia. She has includer in her top 5. And that's a strength where you never want anybody to be left out.
yeah.
So you don't like cliques, you don't like in groups and out groups. You want to make sure everybody feels included. That's a natural strength. Now, in DEI, we might teach people about inclusion and equity and diversity, but people with the natural talent of includer are going to do that with or without training because that's how they're wired. And people that aren't wired that way, maybe training won't really help. And so, thankfully, in the variety and shapes and sizes that humans come in, if we can figure out who's got the talents and strengths that are
Yeah.
needed at this time or in this emergency or in this role, let's elevate people based on the talents they have and not think that we're all a blank slate that anything could be written on, because
All
that's
right.
not true.
So I want to ask you a question then, because you and I first met probably 6 or 8 months ago. I had been following your work for several years, but I heard you on a podcast, and it might be the podcast that you just mentioned from last August. Do you want to give the name of the interviewer again, a shout out? Who was it? Do you remember?
Steve Scully.
Steve Scully. And I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going to reach out and I want to invite Paul Allen onto my podcast. And I did. And then what did you do? You reached out to me and you said, hey, I'm in Virginia. How about if I come visit you? And I was like, it's a Saturday. I don't want to wash my hair and get together with someone. But I was like, you know what? I'm practicing being more spontaneous. So I will say yes. And you came to, you drove 3 hours from DC and we had this lovely, wonderful lunch on our back patio. Um, but you say that you don't have anything related to relationship until your 17th strength. So what was your strength that caused you to be that spontaneous? And from what you told me, you reach out to people all the time. You go meet people, you connect with people, you have these conversations. What strengths at play when you're doing that?
It's got to be my input, because
Mm.
collecting knowledge to me now really is collecting people. That sounds flippant, that sounds weird. But
Collecting
you know,
friends, collecting.
yeah, well, knowing who's important and doing things, and
Okay.
I I was a LinkedIn purist. I was the 44,000th user of LinkedIn. So a powerful digital platform. When Reid Hoffman once emailed the first 100,000 users of LinkedIn and thanked them, I was so proud that I was in the 44,000 and something.
Uh-huh.
But I was a purist because I only wanted to connect with people that I actually knew in real life. Because if someone says to me, "Hey, could you introduce me to Whitney? I see you're connected with her," and I'm like, "I don't really know her." So for many years, I was a LinkedIn purist. My co-founder Clint a few years ago said, "Why don't you try to become a LinkedIn influencer instead of just this purist?" So now I have 30,000 connections and I think 43,000 followers. I'm so impressed, Whitney. You have something like 1.8 million followers on LinkedIn. I'm so proud of you. That's incredible. Your voice and your interviews get spread so widely. But I think that one of the things I learned from my oldest brother, Kurt, who was the CEO of Ancestry for a while, and he was the founder of Folio, like I told you. I remember in the 80s, he would go to conferences, Esther Dyson's conference, and he'd go to hypertext conferences, and he met with Mitch Kapoor, founder of Lotus 123. He went to lots of Bill Gates conferences. My brother went to things all the time. And I was a scanner for him, and I was taking all the conference notes and all the things he was learning, and I was making them searchable in this electronic format. What I learned from Kurt is if he read about something in the news, he would jump on a plane and go meet with the people behind the news.
Hmm.
And I learned that and I started doing that. And so for 30 years or so, whenever I find something really fascinating, I want to go to the first conference on the subject or go meet with the people behind it. And LinkedIn makes it easy to go reach out to people. And so I think my input and my learner
Mhm.
probably drive me there. It's not that I wanted to be friends with Whitney, although I'm super grateful that we're staying in touch and I consider
Mhm.
you a friend. But, it wasn't about
It's not the
the,
animating force. It's that.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and ideation obviously too. I mean, everything you and Clayton Christensen have done,
Yeah.
and this whole idea of disruption, disruptive innovation, but applying it to people,
Mhm.
so there's so many reasons. But I love traveling and I love meeting people for the first time, the second time, the
Yeah.
third time, and exploring what could be in this world, because I think we're all agents and collectively
Mhm.
we get to decide the future. There's so much fright about AGI and Skynet and what's going to happen and how will technology ruin and destroy the world. And I think, it's only up to us as humans how we will use or how we won't use
Mhm.
these technologies. And so I think there just has to be more and more people realizing that we actually get to choose the future of human civilization
Right.
and the evolution from where we are to where we want to be. We get to choose it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this is a more tactical question, and I'm just wondering if you have an answer. So you've got your strengths on Strengths Finders that which you outlined: learner, input, ideation, intellectual, strategic, analytical, and there's many more. How would you use AI right now to help ensure that you are leaning into and doubling down on those strengths on a daily basis? What would you do?
If the AI truly understands each of those themes and
Mm-hmm.
that you have them and how important they are to you, the first thing it could do is look at your calendar and find out, are you spending time using your learner or your input or your intellection? It could look at the time you spend. Now, good coaches, there's 10 or 15,000 Gallup certified strengths coaches. Some of the finest people I've ever met in my career are devoting their life to helping other people discover and use their strengths. It's a wonderful group of people. And one of many of those coaches will look at how you use your time and are you making time for your strengths? Or what percentage of the day are you in the strength zone,
Mm-hmm.
using one or more of those strengths? And what percentage of the day are you spent doing work that does not play to your strengths? So I would say time management or a reflection of how you're currently using your time is one. But even the career you're in, some careers lend themselves to certain strengths being used over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the books that Gallup published on strengths-based selling, one of the final concluding comments from the authors was really interesting to me. Again, it relates to agency. If you have a job that only lets you use 2 or 3 of your strengths, find something to do outside of work that lets you use your other strengths. Volunteer, find a hobby, do something. Because just because you have a career, and sometimes we have to have a job that we don't love or that doesn't play to our strengths because we have to feed our family or make ends meet, but that doesn't mean you have to be a victim to that circumstance. You actually could use your strengths outside of work. And so I really love that empowering thought that
Mm-hmm.
if you're not using your strengths every day at work, if you don't have the dream job that totally aligns the needs of the company
Yeah.
and the purpose and mission of the company with your purpose and mission and your strengths, if that doesn't align, that's okay for now. Find a way to use your strengths outside in other contexts. And so I really believe that's a key to human fulfillment, because it doesn't have to be your job where you use all your strengths.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about you specifically. So for example, you're thinking you want to make sure you're using Learner throughout the course of a day. Is there a way that you personally, Paul, would use AI to make sure you're doubling down on Learner? Let's say tomorrow. If I said, use AI to make sure you're doubling down on Learner tomorrow, what would you do?
So our team is currently working on what we call a co-pilot
Yeah.
for every occupation type. There's like 1,200 occupations at the Department of the ONET database
Yeah.
from the DOL. And there are a couple of things that the co-pilots that are being designed will do. One is it will ask the person what your strengths are,
Mm-hmm.
or either your top 5 or the ones that matter to you. It turns out my 7th, 8th, and 9th matter a great deal to me. Competition activator achiever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm driven to win. I hate to lose. I like to get lots done, and I like to start now. So take all my thinking themes. I probably should have been an academician if it wasn't for competition activator achiever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think those would work really well in an academic situation. Professor, so competition activator achiever really flavor my thinking themes. So the AI copilot that my team is building and designing, that I will be one of the first users of, will look at my day, my schedule, my plans, my goals, and evaluate it through the lens of my top themes, and give me suggestions on how I can get more time doing those things and delegate the things that other people on the team have where they have strengths that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually would love to do the task that I'm currently grinding out because I don't like this task. So one of the fun things to me to imagine about the future of AI and workplace and strengths and occupational roles is that AI could not just be aware of one person and the tasks they have to accomplish, but the entire organization and the variety of strengths. I had a podcast interview with a really fantastic podcast. I think it was called Adventures in Machine Learning. It was about a 90-minute interview. And as we were discussing Jira tickets, a lot of engineers will use Jira to assign tasks. And this engineer on the other side of the call said, I wonder how many engineers have to suffer through doing Jira tasks because they just got assigned to it because they hate that task. And other tasks on the Jira board that they would love to do got assigned to someone else who hates the task they got assigned. So imagine an AI that's not only aware of strengths, but also past work and what you loved and what you didn't love. And it's also aware of the team and the whole project goals and all that has to be done. The manager, with the help of AI, could make sure that the majority of tasks are assigned to the person that it will energize and light up, and they'll do great work, and they'll feel invigorated, rather than, oh, I have to do this again. So we're just getting started with the Copilot feature, but we're going to weave together a number of elements from other organizations and thought leaders into something that we hope will work great for individuals, but also incredibly well across an organization.
Oh, so good. Are there any of your strengths that you're like, I don't want that strength? I don't.
I love all 34.
You do.
And
Okay.
one of the coaches, one of my favorite people that I've ever met on this planet, Kurt Liesfeld, worked at Gallup for 14 years, and he studied Don Clifton's work, and he studied the 34 themes, and he came up with beautiful quick reference cards to help you discover and
Yeah.
deeply study each of the 34. They were called Kurt's cards for many years, and they sold, tens of thousands of copies. I memorized all the statements on the 34 Kurt card theme insight cards.
Of course you did.
And but he passed away, unfortunately, of a heart attack in his early 60s. He had been a pastor for many years, and then he joined Gallup, and for 14 years he not only studied the themes, but he coached lots of people every day. And when I was around Kurt, I once asked him, why do I feel this warmth and almost wisdom and almost holiness in your presence? I've never felt like this around any other person. What is it about you, Kurt, that makes me feel this way when I'm with you? He said, Paul, I've woken up every day for the past 14 years thinking about what's right with people, and then talking to people every day about what's right with them. And I believe that Don Clifton, when he said, what would happen if we focused on what's right with people? Number one, the people themselves will discover their talents and use them. Number two, we will see beauty and amazing things every single moment of every single day. There are so many incredible human beings. And when we look at them through the lens of what's wrong with you or what you've done wrong, we're not going to feel very good. But Kurt got to this transcendent level of being able to only see the good, but he also had a gift with language. He could use words and phrases that no one had ever coined before that have now become the go-to themes, phrases to describe each theme. I just think Don Clifton and Kurt Liesfeld and another friend of mine, Mark Pogue, who was at Gallup for many years, I believe they're in this pantheon up in heaven, just thinking, they were here on earth to help us all discover our God-given talents and use them. And the work that they collectively did is just getting started. But when it spreads to 1 billion people, and people not only embrace who they are, but don't try to change who you are. Like Kurt taught me to find a poster child for every one of the 34 themes, someone that I admire, that when I think about that theme, I think about them and their goodness. And so I don't have any negative feelings about any of the themes except one. And this is a very personal story. My wife has restorative number 2 and empathy number 1. And she always says to me, Paul, you hate my restorative. And I always say to her, only when you use it to fix me. Because people with restorative, okay, I would say that's the one theme that I'm glad I don't have.
But it's not yours. It's her.
Well, it's her. Okay, but restorative people love to find problems. They look for problems and they love to solve problems. They get the satisfaction when they restore something from its poor state or broken state to a whole state or a good state. Now, if I had to stack rank all 34 and say, okay, if there's one that I don't get to choose, I would choose that. But the reason is she's got empathy. She senses people's emotions and emotional state. She knew how I felt when I came home from work before I opened the door. She has this sixth sense.
Wow.
She knows how everybody in the room is feeling at any given moment. And restorative means that she is driven to solve the problem. And so when she says, you hate my restorative, I'm like, well, because she notices I'm out of sorts and she tries to fix it. Like she's got communication. So she engages me, and I'd rather just go into my intellection cave and a few hours later, my problems are gone. But actually it's been really helpful and healthy that she's helped me confront and deal with and process emotions. I'm not really emotionally intelligent or high EQ compared to so many other people. So I do think that, to answer your question, restorative is amazing because lots of problems need lots of solutions, and restorative people will run into those instead of. Now, maximizer is one of my top 15 strengths. I think it's number 11. And maximizers love good things, and they love to turn good things into great things. And maximizers don't like problems. So on the spectrum of loving to find problems and fix them, restorative at the very front, maximizers at the very end. Please don't give me any broken tasks, don't make me solve any ugly problems. Just give me something good to work on that I can turn into something even better.
So who's your role model on learner?
That's a really good question. So my poster child, I used to have these
Yeah.
handy and ready. I used to do lots of workshops, and I don't remember. I think Da Vinci was an insatiable learner, and I think Elon Musk probably, because he's been a bookworm since he was a young child. I'm reading his biography now, and he learned rocket science from books. I mean, that guy goes to the sources and just consumes all that information. We did a little project where we went through 2,000 famous people on Wikipedia, and we tried to prompt AI to guess what their top 5 strengths were.
Oh, yeah.
And then put it in a big grid, and you could go put in your top 5 and see who you're like. And Leonardo da Vinci and I apparently share the same strengths, along with J.R.R. Tolkien and H.G. Wells. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I'll take that.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So when you think about the S curve and you think about Soar and what you're building, you're not going to tell me you're on mastery. Would you say you're on the launch point, or are you in the sweet spot?
Definitely on the launch point. And the reason is, while I've started many companies in the past, I've often stepped down as CEO because I didn't like the responsibility of being in charge of everything. I really like creating products, marketing products, doing the things I love to do. So I've often stepped down as CEO. Well, in this Soar AI Studio model, I'm the CEO of the parent company, and we'll need to bring in 15 CEOs in the next 2 or 3 years. And that is definitely launch point for me on the learning curve. I'm not great at delegating. I'm not great at hiring. I've been very lucky to hire brilliant people, but it wasn't because I had a system. I just was blessed or lucky to find the right people at the right time. Yeah. But I've also hired a lot of people that didn't turn out to be the right fit. And so I think that's a huge challenge, to recruit values-based people that aren't trying to get super rich, and they're trying to find a way to use AI to uplift humanity in our legal AI portal, our medical, our health portal, our finance portal. AI could really help all of us go through all of our S curves in life much more quickly, because it can personalize the advice and speed up the game film, give us more moments to reflect. I really am bullish about how AI could affect the quality of life and the overall journey of every human being in all contexts of life. I'm really excited about that. But certainly I'm at the launch point on understanding how to build a portfolio of companies led by great values-based leaders.
Yeah. So you would say you're at mastery of knowing how to incubate and start a company, but you feel like you're on the launch point of knowing how to build out a portfolio and scale the companies within that portfolio.
That's exactly right.
Oh. Okay. So off camera, is there anything you want me to ask you that I didn't before I go to my final 2 questions?
Nope, there isn't.
Nope. Okay. All right. So Paul, what was useful for you today?
Whitney, talking to you and listening to your thoughtful questions, I've been an admirer of the kinds of questions you ask and how personally you customize the questions to your guests. So thank you for that. I'm on a journey myself to try to be more curious about people and learn more about people. And I know, as John Maxwell says, great leaders ask great questions. So I think it's always useful for me to think about you and your experience learning how to ask the right questions to get the kind of responses that people can give that are meaningful to your audience. And so I would say that that's probably the most useful thing for me, is to just take away after this conversation with you the desire I already have to become much, much better as a listener and asking questions of all the people that I interact with, instead of making it about me or what I'm thinking or what I'm doing. listening and asking great questions. So that's probably the thing I will ponder the most. One thing that your book has been getting me excited about for the first time in my life is to create a vision board for the next 5 years, but you call it an action board.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
Tara Swart.
yeah, I've started working on this, and I'm very excited that I will soon have a visualization of, the next several years of my life with family, faith, and work goals, all visually there. Last night in the college football championship, the quarterback from Michigan, the commentators were talking about his visualization of his goals for the past few years, including a rose in his teeth from the Rose Bowl. Like, he just has been visualizing for years. And it reminded me of what you've been talking about and advising us all to do. So, yeah. So I think the takeaway from today is, Paul, keep following Whitney's work and her S-curve and learn as much as you can from her and her guests, because that will really help you get through your next S-curve.
And that reminds me back to the high focus AI, right? Like, how do you just focus on the question, focus on the person you're talking to? But I love that visualization of the rose. Okay. So any final thoughts, closing thoughts that you would like to share with our guests? Not our guests, you're the guest, with our listeners.
Just that the world does seem to be hurtling towards really, really difficult generational problems, both the Israeli Hamas conflict, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the $1 trillion interest payment on the debt, the $34 trillion, the kind of out-of-control government. I actually think we're facing really, really challenging times. And my advice to everyone in the world is to start by looking at what talents did God give you? And how can you find out what those are? Strengths Finder, Clifton Strengths is one instrument, talking to other people. There's lots of clues to talent. But I really think that for humanity to deal with the massive challenges, geopolitical, financial, environmental, educational, cultural, all these different headwinds that we're facing. And I think the fear is tangible. People are so afraid, and young people aren't dating and marrying and having kids. That's the most important, joyful part of life, is to get married and to have children and to grow and raise your children, invest in them, and have this instant love for them that is divine. It's just not human. And so people are short, or they're just selling themselves short because of fear. And yet, I believe that we have all been equipped collectively with the right tools and resources to overcome the challenges of our day. And if we collectively do that, and more good people are harnessing their talents and strengths to overcome, we can create a really, really bright future. I think Jordan Peterson held a conference in London called the Alliance for Responsible Citizens, where they're trying to say, here are the 6 big issues facing the world, and here's the current fearful narrative on each of these 6 areas. Let's create a new narrative, and then let's aim towards having that new narrative be the one that plays out in real life.
I love that. That's so good. So good. All right. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Whitney.